Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to be finding the equation of a line parallel to another line and that passes through a given point. So our first step in finding an equation that's parallel to this guy and passes through this point is I want to take this equation and figure out what its slope is. So to do that, we're going to put this equation in slope-intercept form as our first step. Okay, so I've written out our first step. And putting something in slope-intercept form, equation of a line, is nothing more than just solving the equation for y. So our first step in doing that is let's subtract 2x from both sides. That leaves us with 5y on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, we'll have negative 2x plus 12. And then the next step is let's divide both sides by 5, and that will get y alone. So what we're left with is y equals negative 2/5 x plus 12 over 5. The reason why I wanted to do this again was I wanted to find the slope of this original equation that they gave us. The reason why I wanted to know the slope is because I know that if I have two parallel lines, their slopes have to be exactly the same. So the slope of this line is just the number that's being multiplied by x. I've been pointing to it, so it's just that negative 2/5 number. That's my slope. And so I know the slope of the line that I'm trying to write the equation for is also going to be negative 2/5. So step 2 is we're going to start to build the equation of our parallel line. Our first step in doing that, so our step 2, is whenever I'm writing an equation for a brand new line, I always just start by writing y equals mx plus b. Because I know that any equation of a line can be written in this form. It also gives me a target. So what I'm specifically interested in is filling in the m value, the slope, and filling in the b value, the y-intercept. So our next step is to find that slope. In this case, as I mentioned before, because our line is supposed to be parallel to this given line, we know that the slopes of our parallel line and our given line have to be the same. So the slope of our parallel line is negative 2/5, which means the slope of our line is also negative 2/5. Which means when I go to plug in, I already have part of my equation. I've got y equals negative 2/5 x plus b. So I'm just plugging my m value in where it belongs in our equation. Step 3 then is we have to find, step 4, we have to find our b value. The way that we're going to find our b value is we need a point that we know is on our line, and look at what they gave us. They told us that this point is on our line. In other words, our line passes through that point. And 3 is an x value, 4 is a y value. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that point, 3, 4, and we're going to plug it in for x and y in our equation. Okay, after all, that point is supposed to be a solution to this equation. So our next step is to find b by plugging in the x and y coordinates of a point on our line. So again, that 3 is an x, the 4 is a y. So we're going to take 4, plug it in for y. That gives us 4 equals negative 2/5 times, and now since negative 2/5 is a fraction, when I plug 3 in for x, I'm going to write it in as 3 over 1 plus b. Okay, if we multiply those two fractions together, we get 4 equals negative 6 over 5 plus b. So there's lots of ways to solve this particular equation. I just gave myself a little extra space here. When I have fractions, my personal preference is to clear out those fractions. So the next step that I'm going to take to solve this equation for b is I'm going to multiply both sides of my equation by the least common denominator, which is 5. So I'm going to take the 4, just put it in parentheses, I'm going to take the negative 6/5, put it in parentheses, and I'm going to take the b, put it in parentheses, and I'm going to multiply everything on both sides by 5. Okay, if we do that, we're left with 20 equals, on the other side, I've got a 5 on top, 5 on the bottom, so I can divide out by that common factor, and then I'm left with negative 6 plus 5b. Add 6 to both sides, and we get 26 equals 5b. And then divide both sides by 5, and we get 26/5 equals b. Okay, my final step then is just to write the final equation in my line. So that's going to be our step 5. So we know our b value is 26/5. If I go back to a previous step, remember that we already knew the slope. So we knew the slope was negative 2/5. So I'm just going to take this equation and then plug our b value in. So our final equation is just going to be y equals negative 2/5 x and then plus our 26/5. Here's another one for you to try. Pause the video and then restart after you've given it a try. Okay, so our first step, just like before, is I want to write this equation in slope-intercept form because I'm interested in the slope of this particular line. I know that since I'm writing an equation of a line parallel to it, our slopes will be the same. So let's take that equation and solve it for y. So we've got 3x plus 4y equals 7, minus 3x, minus 3x. That gives us 4y equals negative 3x plus 7. Divide both sides by 4. And that gives us y equals negative 3/4 x plus 7/4. And that means the slope of this line is just the guy in front of the x, so it's just that negative 3/4. So once I have that slope, well, I know the equation of my brand new parallel line. Well, it's going to have the equation y equals mx plus b, and I know that the slope has to match the slope of the line that it's parallel to. So the slope has to equal this negative 3/4 again. So I can plug that in for m. And then we know from the given information that our line also passes through this point 4, negative 2. 4 is an x value, negative 2 is a y value. So we can take that 4, negative 2, we can plug 4 in for x, we can plug negative 2 in for y, and that's going to help us to figure out the b value. So here we go. We've got negative 2 equals negative 3/4 times, and again, since the negative 3/4 is a fraction, when I plug in the 4 for x, I'm going to write it in as a fraction, 4 over 1 plus b. Okay, from there, if we multiply our fractions together, we've got negative 2 equals, and here we're really lucky because you'll notice that I have a common factor of 4 on the top and on the bottom. So I can divide top and bottom by 4, and then if I multiply what's left, I've got negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, over 1 times 1 is 1, so I don't even need to write the bottom, and then plus b. If I solve for b, add 3 to both sides, and that gives me 1 equals b. So now if I take my equation, which was back here, I've already got my m plugged in. I'm just going to plug my b value in, and I'm all done. So my final equation is y equals negative 3/4 x plus 1. So one thing I want to point out is that notice from the original equation that really the only thing that we were interested in was the slope of that line. The b value didn't really play any role in the equation of our parallel line And that's because if two lines are parallel, they're going to have different y-intercepts. They're going to hit the y-axis in different places, or they wouldn't be parallel to each other. They'd actually be the same line if they had the same slope and the same y-intercept. So the b value, we don't actually even end up using it. And the same thing was true about the first problem that we looked at.